All right, so it's July 6, 2007. We are on the corner of Hill and Wabash at the courthouse in Wabash, Indiana. We are interviewing today Max Reed. I'm Ashley Lichtenbarger, and the camerawoman is Megan Frick on behalf of the Wabash County Historical Museum. Max, what branch of service did you serve in?
I was in the United States Air Force.
Okay, and during what war did you serve?
Well, I was in during the Vietnam War,
Okay.
and I was in for 28 years, so my the Vietnam came during my second assignment.
Okay, and what were the years that you were in the service?
I was in from 1961 to my retirement in 1989.
Okay, and where were some of the places that you served?
Well, my first assignment was pilot training in Chandler, Arizona, Williams Air Force Base. From there, I served in a cargo unit in California, Travis Air Force Base. From Travis, I went to Da Nang, Vietnam, for my 1-year service in the Vietnam War. And from Vietnam, I went to Germany, and I was in a air commando unit in Ramstein, Germany. From Germany, I went to West Virginia, and I was the state liaison officer for Civil Air Patrol. Then I went to New Jersey, where I was the operations officer for Security Police. And from there to Kunsan, Korea, where I worked in the 8th Attack Fighter Wing Command Post. And from Korea, I came to Grissom Air Force Base, and I was there for 10 years. I served in base operations, tanker scheduling, and I flew the KC-135 tanker aircraft, and I retired from Grissom in 1989.
Okay. What made you decide to enlist in the service?
Well, partly because I felt it was something that I could do and wanted to do, and something that needed to be done. And also it was a part of my education. I went through ROTC at Ball State, and the ROTC helped me get through college. And after I finished college, I was obligated to serve for 5 years in the Air Force. And after 5 years, I decided that I would stay in.
Okay. And where were you living at the time?
By the time I went into the service, I was actually still residing here in Wabash, although I was in college at Ball State in Muncie, Indiana.
Okay. And how did you come about choosing the branch that you chose? When did you have to choose that before you went to college?
Well, I would have had in college. I could have been in Army or Navy or any of them, but Air Force was just my first choice because I had aspirations of flying, and I grew up here in Wabash during World War II, and I was exposed to the Naval Aviation branch. At that time was Bunker Hill Navy Base. And so as a child, I saw a lot of airplanes flying around, and I was interested in flying.
All right. Do you remember your first days in the service, in training or boot camp?
Well, in ROTC, we went to summer camp, and we went sort of a basic training. Actually, prior to my Air Force career, I was in the Army Reserves, and I went through some basic training and field artillery training. But as soon as I finished ROTC, during which I got my pilot license in a small civilian airplane, then I went to, my first assignment was pilot training, and there we went right into the T-37 jet trainer. And after 6 months, we went to the T-33 jet trainer, and then after 1 year, I had received my wings as a pilot.
Okay. Do you remember your instructors during training? In any of those trainings, was the relationship harsh or hard, like people think of it sometimes?
Well, you know, the military is a matter of perception. Some people resist and some people enjoy it as a challenge, and I guess I was the latter. I took even survival training, you know, as a challenge rather than as a task. And pilot training was a challenge, and we had good instructors, and it was a lot of fun.
What was involved in the pilot training?
Pilot training, you first 6 months of basic maneuvers, instrument flying, and a touch of formation, and then the six months afterwards was more geared toward combat type or formation, flying formation, and learning more instrument procedures. And I guess that's about you. We didn't really train for any specific airplane, but after pilot training, then you went on to train in the airplane that you were assigned to. And in my case, that was a large cargo, 4-engine cargo plane. So I went to the base where I was going to fly that airplane, and I got a local checkout in that aircraft.
Okay. You said that Vietnam was your second assignment. What was your first assignment?
Well, actually, after pilot training, my first assignment was with the Military Airlift Command and flying the C-133 turboprop. It was a large aircraft that hauled cargo, including tanks and missiles, overseas to every location. And so that was actually my first assignment out of pilot training, and then Vietnam was my second assignment. I was in the C-133 for 3 years, and then I got my orders to go to Vietnam.
Okay. Do you remember arriving in Vietnam and some of your perceptions
Yeah,
that you had going into it?
it was very interesting. When I first arrived there, I was the only officer on the airplane, the only Air Force officer. The rest of the plane was filled with mostly enlisted Army. And so they separated me from the rest of them, and they were going to send me downtown. And this came just after a briefing that the security people gave that said, if you go into town, be real careful because they have a habit of hanging hand grenades on the windows. And so that was kind of intimidating. And fortunately, I saw that one of the briefers had been one of my instructors at Ball State. So I went up to him and I said, you know, I really don't want to go downtown. And he said, okay, we'll put you up here on the base. So I ended up staying on the base that night.
Right.
But it was rather, you know, just arriving into a war zone and then being briefed about the dangers, and then they were going to send me off alone.
What was your particular job or assignment in Vietnam?
My initial assignment was flying a small cargo plane, a twin-engine C-123, and our job was to deliver mostly Marines. Now, the country was divided into different segments, and the Marines had the northern segment, and that's where I was, up in the northern part of South Vietnam. So our typical mission of the day would be to haul food and ammunition and supplies out to the Marines. If there was a skirmish going on somewhere, we might bring in reinforcements. Once we landed at our forward operating base, which was usually a dirt strip or a PSP type temporary landing strip, we would deliver our cargo, and occasionally we would have to evacuate wounded and dead soldiers that had been Marines that had been killed during a battle. So our daily mission would be very varied. We'd be hauling ammunition, even occasionally, because of some of the outposts were back in the hills, they didn't get fresh food, and the weather would sometimes prohibit airplanes from going in there for weeks at a time. So if you took in fresh meat, it would spoil. So we had a system where we would airdrop live cows into the back country, and they would keep them until they needed them. That kept them from spoiling.
Very good. That's very interesting. Doing these missions, flying into territories that might be combative, did your plane ever take any hits or anything?
Just about everybody got some type of hits. We tried to avoid areas where there were heavy anti-aircraft, but we didn't always know that. Night missions were especially hazardous. The Marines would sometimes call on us to come over their area and drop flares so that they could see what was going on. And when you're dropping flares, you become the target then, because they want to get you out of the area. So we would try to stay high enough that we would not get hit by small arms. And fortunately, during my flights, I never got hit by anything very big. So the only thing that ever hit my airplane was like a small rifle. When we get back to the field, they'd look at our airplane and they'd say, "Oh, you got a hole." But I was very lucky, and I never got hit by anything big or anything that injured me.
Okay. What are some of your most memorable experiences during that time of your service?
Well, most memorable, of course, you mentioned when you first come into the country. I remember I got a flight up to Da Nang, which was going to be my permanent base for that year. And as I checked into the bunkhouse, they looked around and they said, "Well, you can have that bunk over there because the previous occupant went on a mission and he didn't come back." So that was a little scary. But we did lose some airplanes up there on it was very hazardous flying, and once in a while an airplane would get out into the canyons or somewhere and didn't come back. Just working with the Marines was memorable. I made a lot of friends with the guys that were out they called them A-teams out in the countryside, that they were working with the local Vietnamese army. And so the fact that we were helping them and resupplying them was very satisfying.
Do you feel that your position, your particular assignment on a small cargo plane was one of the luckier ones as far as different planes could have been, different positions?
Oh, yeah, probably. It's the luck of the draw, you know. Depending on which avenue you take in the Air Force or in any military endeavor, it's partly your choosing and what you want to do, but it's also the Air Force where they decide to send you and where they need you. And so it doesn't always, you don't always get the assignment you want. And if you get one that is satisfying, then that's part luck and part of your career planning.
Okay. Can you tell us about the awards or medals that you received? Any of them that are particularly special for you?
Yeah, I mentioned the Bronze Star. The Bronze Star is one of the higher of the medals, but it's not the highest. The Silver Star, the Medal of Honor, I didn't do any of those. And the Bronze Star just indicates that you've been into an area and done some dangerous things. Air medals were given based on the number of missions that you flew. So if you flew 25 missions, you got an air medal. I think I ended up with like 3. Unit commendation medals, a lot of these are, they go with the career plan that you're on. You know, if you work somewhere for a year, you're normally awarded some type of an award.
Okay.
So they don't always mean that you did anything spectacular.
Okay. To talk a little bit about your life while in Vietnam, how did you keep in contact with your family?
Well, of course, this is back in the 60s. and we didn't have internet, and the telephone system was almost non-existent. So contact with the family was mostly just letters. I would receive a letter, you know, twice a week, and I would send out 3 or 4 letters a week. The mail would take probably 10 days to get back and forth between Indiana, had to go to the coast and then come across on other airplanes, mostly airmail. I did have an occasion at the midpoint of my year in Vietnam. We were authorized to take a week vacation. We called it R&R, Rest and Rehabilitation. And I had a choice of going to several different places like Hong Kong, Taipei, but I chose to come to Hawaii because that way my wife could fly there and meet me. So that was a very nice vacation in the middle of my one-year tour, was meeting my wife in Hawaii, and we got to spend a week together there.
That's very good. How long were you and your wife married before you left?
I was married in '59, so I had been married 7 years. In '65, when I got notified I was going to leave for Vietnam. My wife was pregnant. We'd already had 2 children, and my son was going to be born while I was gone. So I applied to the Air Force to delay my departure for Vietnam by a month. That way I could stay home until my son was born. And so when he was 5 days old, I left Indiana, and my wife had a 3-year-old daughter, an 18-month-old daughter, and a 5-day-old son. So she had a pretty busy year.
Wow. Was the rest of your family close by?
Yes, I had. I chose to come back here to Wabash so that my wife would have my family and her family nearby, and so that was good for her.
You mentioned being able to have that week off to go to Hawaii. Was there any other leave time that you got?
No, that basically the only other break from the war zone was occasionally we would have an aircraft that needed to be taken to Taiwan for repairs, and so we rotated that amongst the crews so that each crew got to take an airplane over to Taipei for a week. That was sort of a small vacation.
Okay. How many people were on your cruise? In your crew?
In Vietnam, we had 2 pilots, pilot and co-pilot. We had a navigator, and we had a loadmaster and an engineer. So there were 5 of us. Mm-hmm. The loadmaster was in charge of the cargo, making sure it was tied down and the balance of the aircraft was all right. The engineer took care of the engines and the fueling and all that, and the navigator tried to keep us from getting lost. And we had to occasionally navigate down low level, up valleys, and the navigator could keep us on course. And the pilot and the co-pilot were pretty busy just finding the airfield and taking care of helping the navigator with navigation.
Okay. What do you remember about the food that you had to eat there?
The food in Vietnam was pretty good. We had, of course, daily airlift from the States, and so they brought over a lot of good food, and we had a dining hall with good cooks, and there were a lot of things that were hard to get, like fresh milk and things like that, but basically the food was good, and I'm not a picky eater anyway, so.
Okay. And you had plenty of supplies while you were over there?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Was there anything that you did for good luck, anything that you kept with you, or anything along those lines?
No, not really. I think when I got there, I made it a habit to read some of the Bible each day. I thought that would keep me close to God and to my family.
Okay. when you weren't flying and you weren't working, what did you do for entertainment?
We didn't have a lot of latitude because the areas around the base were sometimes hostile, but we could go out to the beach area off of the shore. In fact, I think later they made a movie called China Beach, and I'm not sure that that was very realistic, because when I was at China Beach, it was just a bunch of Air Force guys out there swimming. We could go out to the beach once in a while. The Marines on their side of the base had a racquetball court, and I play racquetball, so I played racquetball about every other day. We had a group of guys that would get together and have picnics at the barracks, and we'd cook out and do things like that. We did a lot of musical taping, making copies of each other's records and tapes and stuff, and playing music. And, that's about it.
Okay. Do you recall any particularly humorous things that happened or unusual things?
Well, the guys had this little deal. If we'd find an artillery shell, which was about that long out, when we were out on a mission, we'd find an artillery shell that was made out of real brass. We'd take it back with us and give it to our houseboy, and he would take it downtown, and they would make a vase out of that. And they would heat it and pound it and shape that artillery shell into a beautiful vase. And so a lot of us had those made, and we'd have inscriptions put on it. And the problem with the language was sometimes evident, and this one friend of mine, he gave the houseboy a note. He said, on my vase I want R.P. Braden. And he said he was afraid he wouldn't understand that, so he put R and then only, P only, Braden. So when he got his vase back, it said Ronly Ponely Braden. And he was so mad he threw it in the wastebasket, and then we all laughed later, said that would have been the best souvenir of the war, was, you know, the humor of him not getting the inscription that he wanted.
Nice. Did you pull any pranks, or did others pull pranks on one another?
Oh, you know, I don't recall right now any, but that's been 40 years ago. We mostly, we joked a lot, and when we had our cookouts and stuff, and we would sometimes, you know, be joking and kidding each other, but I didn't do anything really serious as far as pranks.
Okay.
Oh, I do recall one event where our navigator carried this great big bag all the time, and one of the loadmasters, he would add down in the bottom, he put a chain in the bottom of his bag, and the navigator carried it for several days, and one day he was loading his bags, and he threw his bag up onto the plane. He said, "Boy, that thing gets heavier every day," and we all burst out laughing, and then he knew something was going on. He pulled the bag open, and he pulled out that long chain. And so we all took a good berating from him.
Oh, nice, that's funny. Did you keep a personal diary or a journal?
I'm trying to remember. I think that I started to, and then I kind of I was going to keep a logbook, but I got behind in it, and at the end of the tour, I just wrote in my logbook the typical missions that we flew, but I didn't actually have a daily log. No.
Okay. Experiences from other assignments that you had in your 28 years?
Well, when I left Vietnam, I went to Germany. We worked with the Army Special Forces, and that was very interesting because they trained with all the different countries of Europe. So we had a wide variety of missions down to Italy, and these were all the elite special forces of each country. The Danish Jaeger Corps, which were famous for their resistance to the German occupation of World War II. The Spanish Paracaidistas, who were the special forces of Spain. The Greeks, the Turks. So it was a very interesting assignment because each month we might be in a different country doing a different kind of training between our army and their armies. And so we learned a lot about the different countries. We learned how the British fought in the desert during World War II against Rommel. We did some desert navigation and landed out in the desert, in the North African desert. So it was very, very interesting and a lot of good training.
Did your wife and your family travel with you when you were in different places? Were they in Germany with you, and were they in Jersey with you?
The families could go, and it's still restricted as to certain assignments that my family was with me on in my pilot training, and in California when I was flying cargo, but they couldn't go when I went to Vietnam. Then they went with me to Germany. In fact, my youngest daughter was born in Germany, and they were with me in West Virginia and New Jersey. And then I had to go to Korea, and that was an unaccompanied assignment, as we call it. So for that year, we were separated again, and then we rejoined back when I came back to Grissom, and we were together then from the rest of my career.
Okay. All right. Do you recall the day that your service ended, your retirement?
Oh yes, that was very nostalgic. I was at Grissom. My first granddaughter had just been born, so she was a baby. The unit that I was assigned to had a big party for me, and they gave me some memorabilia, which I have at home. We should have had this at home in my office where I've got all the plaques and stuff. A flag that had been flown over the White House, a picture of David Letterman, signed by David Letterman because I was a fan of his at that time. And of course there's a formal party with the presentation of the certificate, and so it was very, very touching.
Okay. And after you retired from your service, what did you do after that as far as work?
I was kind of a different individual in that I didn't go into the service. I went to college 3 years out of high school, so I was older than most of my contemporaries, and since I stayed in the Air Force for that long, 28 years, I was a little bit old to be going into another profession in flying, because they like to get you when you're younger. So I wasn't really a good candidate for the airlines or any type of flying assignment, and I considered going back to teaching school, which is the reason my degree at Ball State. And I kind of just retired for about a year and a half, and I did do some substitute teaching. I coached a tennis team. I worked for my brother-in-law on the farm, just doing different things to kind of decide what I want to do. And then this part-time job here at the courthouse became available, and it sounded like something I would be interested in, helping veterans with their dealings with the VA. So I took that job in '92, so it's been 15 years and I'm still here.
What's the title of your job here?
My title here is the Wabash County Veterans Service Officer.
Thank you. When you were in the service, did you create close friendships with some of your other officers and your other soldiers?
Yeah, we're a very close fraternity. I still email and occasionally visit some of my old Air Force friends. We keep in contact, Christmas cards, and we send pictures. And last year, I met one of my friends in Lake Tahoe, and we skied together. Got in the hot tub together, jumped out into the snow together. So we relived our old Air Force times.
Nice. Do you have reunions with any of the groups that you were involved with throughout your military?
Occasionally, but they're so far away. In fact, I received a invitation just this week for a reunion in England, but I don't think I'm going to make the trip to England. But it would be interesting. But we do keep in touch with them.
Did you join any veterans organizations after your retirement?
Veterans organizations. I'm a member of the VFW and the American Legion, primarily because of my interest in veterans and secondarily because of my job here. I feel that I need to be in touch with them, and so I do participate in their activities.
Okay. What sort of activities do they do?
They do educational. We go to high schools and for Veterans Day. We do programs on Memorial Day. If a family has a veteran who dies and they want like a military style funeral, we will do a funeral. I play the bugle, and we also participated last week in the 4th of July celebration out at Field of Dreams with a flag ceremony and a rifle salute and taps. So this is the type of things that they do.
All right. Do you feel that your military experiences influenced the way that you feel about war and about the military?
Well, yeah, I'm sure it does, and I'm I guess a pro-military person. I feel that the military has a job to do. They're given that job by our government, and I feel that people should honor and respect what the military is doing because they're doing it at the direction of the people. So when one of the Vietnam War was unpopular, we don't know what the ramifications were, but in my own opinion, I feel that the Vietnam War was the first step in the fall of the Russian Empire, USSR, and eventually the falling of the Berlin Wall. Those were all steps, what we would call the domino theory, in that maybe people don't agree that the war in Vietnam, whether it was right or wrong or whether it did any good, but we don't know when we're in a war what the outcome is going to be, and we have to trust our leaders and our government that they're doing the right thing.
Okay. And how do you think that your service, considering that it was your career, how do you think that affected your life after?
Well, it made me respect our military and our government, and raise my children to do the same.
Okay. All right. Are there any other stories or things that you'd like to add that we haven't talked about?
I can't think of any right now. I should have made some notes.
Alrighty. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, I do have one.
Go ahead.
My claim to fame is, of course, I flew a lot of airplanes, but on one occasion in Germany, we were called upon to pick up a general who was stranded because of a failure of his airplane, and the general was Chuck Yeager. So I always brag that I once hauled Chuck Yeager in the back of my airplane. He's the man who broke the sound barrier. So he was flying with me in a DC-3, which is about the slowest airplane there is.
Very good. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And,
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate it.